Today we're going to cover the 5 types of multifamily. That's right, as I see it, there are generally 5 types of what we would consider small multifamily here in Bryan and College Station. And of course, each one has their own pros and cons. The numbers associated with each are different, from purchase price to rent rates, vacancies, and all the rest. And don't worry, we're going to cover each one in depth in today's video on your favorite channel, Investing in Bryan and College Station, where I help you grow your wealth through real estate in my favorite towns, Bryan and College Station, Texas. Guys, stay tuned because this is gonna be a good one. If you don't know who I am, my name is Greg Schwartz. I'm a Marine Corps pilot turned investor turned real estate agent. I was also a property manager for 3 years here in town, where I managed everything from single family houses to duplexes to apartment complexes and office buildings. And today I help investors just like yourself grow their wealth through buying and selling real estate here in Bryan and College Station. So if you'd like me to help you, go ahead and reach out. Contact me. My information is in the description below. I would love to schedule a call with you today. Let's jump right into the 5 types of multifamily that we see in Bryan and College Station. Of course, when we talk about multifamily, we're really focused on small multifamily, so 4 units or less. For our first one, we've got the 1940s, 1950s built homes with garage apartments, also known as ADUs. So yes, these are technically single family homes, but they do have an additional unit, so we'll call them multifamily. 2, we've got the 80s built duplexes. 3, 80s built fourplexes. 4 would be the 2000s built duplexes, and 5, last but not least, are the new build Agg Shack duplexes. Don't worry, we're going to go into each one in depth. Starting off with number 1. So we're really talking about older homes with garage apartments. These are going to be found usually near downtown Bryan or closer to campus in the Northgate area or the Southgate area. Again, these are going to be zoned as single family. But somewhere along the way, someone decided to convert the detached garage or extra space into an additional dwelling unit or garage apartment. And you can generally treat this like a duplex. The thing is, because of the age and varying conditions, the prices can drastically vary from $200,000 literally all the way up to $1 million. So it's hard to say exactly what price to put on these, but for folks looking at these, I think they're great for house hackers, where they're going to live in the house and then rent out the ADU. They're great for Airbnbers because they're generally in a good location, and when fixed up, they can have that charm of the older properties in our downtown areas. But I do recommend them for folks who are not new to dealing with older properties or major rehabs. A lot of these can be in pretty rough shape, so you're going to be putting in tens of thousands of dollars to get them into that condition necessary for an Airbnb or even just for a long-term rental. So if you're ready to roll up your sleeves, jump in, take on a major project, if you really want to be that HGTV before and after photo, then maybe the older homes with an ADU is a good place for you to start for your multifamily journey. Up next, we have our 80s built duplexes. And why do I call them 80s built duplexes? Well, because there's a lot of duplexes that were built in the late 70s, early 80s. In fact, over 1,000 of these duplexes were built, the majority in 1980 and 1981. And they all have very similar layouts. They're generally going to be 2-bedroom, 1-bath. Occasionally you'll find the 2-2 or the 3-2. And occasionally you'll find some with garages, etc., etc. But for the most part, assume that you're looking at 2-bedroom, 1-bath duplexes. They built them all over Bryan and College Station. But as you can see in this map of duplexes sold in the last few years, the largest majority of them are going to be in College Station between Hallman and Rock Prairie. The neighborhood where you find the most of these is going to be Southwood Valley. So what do they sell for? The median price is $290,000, but we see a pretty good range from as low as $225,000 all the way up to about $325,000. When it comes to rent rates, the median rent rate is $1,085 or $2,170 for the entire property. In general, this means that they cash flow well. You can also get higher rent rates if you do higher level renovations, which brings me to some of the pros and cons. On the pro side of things, they're a generally low price point, so they're a good entry level investment. They don't require gut rehabs for the most part. So for about $10,000 to $15,000, you can bring these things back to life and get over the median rent rate. Some of the cons include, well, they are pretty old. At this point, you're talking about an asset that is 40 plus years old. And in a lot of cases, there's deferred maintenance. So don't be surprised if you run into an old roof, old water heater, old AC, or generally just patched together house. We're talking drywall with patch after patch after patch. But again, that leads back to the value add. You can improve this and get better rents. And then lastly, they can be in areas that aren't always super desirable. Because if you remember, it's 40 years old. Over the last 40 years, if a group of landlords all decide to neglect their properties, that neighborhood is going to be less desirable. But the good news is there are a lot of landlords out there like yourself and myself that are improving these, so you can find areas where these make great rentals. I think that they're awesome for my house hackers, my value-add investors, particularly those that are looking to roll up their sleeves and do some of their work themselves, where they get those renovation costs down from, say, $15,000 down to $10,000 or $8,000 or $7,000 per side, in which case it makes it a great investment. For our third type of multifamily, we're going to be looking at 80s built fourplexes. And these are near and dear to my heart because my first ever investment, my first ever house hack in Bryan and College Station was a fourplex, 700 Navarro. I still own her and I love her to death. So what are we looking at here? Well, just like the duplexes, we are looking at a lot of 80s built fourplexes, guys. Over 600 were built in that time frame. Just like the duplexes, they're scattered throughout Bryan and College Station, but there is a large concentration in that Southwood Valley area. Just like the duplexes, they're generally 2-bedroom, 1 bath, or 1.5 bath. Occasional 2-bedroom, 2 bath, and on very rare occasions, in fact, I've only seen 1 or 2 of these, 3-bedroom, 2 baths. And of course, since they are fourplexes, you're getting 4 units, they're more expensive. You see prices between $350,000 and $550,000, with our median price right there at about $472,000. And that sounds like a lot, but your rent is also pretty dang strong. Your average rent per unit is right around $933 per unit. So times 4, you're looking at about $3,700 for the entire building. So you're pretty close to that 1% rule. And in fact, my units rent out for right around $1,000 each. So we're bringing in $4,000 for our fourplexes. What are the pros of our 80s built fourplexes? Well, again, there's a lot of them to choose from. And although the prices are relatively high, the cash flow is pretty dang strong thanks to the strong rents. Some of the cons would be, well, you do have that deferred maintenance again, and if you think about putting in $10,000 to $20,000 per unit, you're talking about $40,000 to $80,000 in renovations, and we haven't talked about exterior or roofs or ACs yet. So it can get pretty expensive. In general, these are great for folks looking to do value add, or someone who's really trying to maximize that house hack like I did, live in 1 unit, rent out the rest. But I don't recommend them for folks just starting out, because taking on that many tenants at once, taking on that amount of rehab can be pretty risky. So this is not necessarily my go-to for new investors or people just starting out. For our third type, we have our 2000s built duplex. And similar to our 80s vintage stuff, there is a large amount of 2000s, we're talking 1997 to about 2006, built duplexes in Bryan and College Station. When I looked at the permits, there were over 300 pulled in that time frame. You're generally going to have 3 bedrooms per side, and if they were built before 2000, they're going to be 3 2s, and after 2000, they're generally going to be 3 3s. They just realized that the 3 3s are more attractive to the students, which is one of the advantages of this type of multifamily. So where are they located? Well, in Bryan, you can usually find these somewhere near the Bryan Walmart, where Villa Maria and 2018 cross paths. If you see a street and it has the name Hollow on it, it probably has duplexes. Check it out. In College Station, we're looking at pockets of these, but the majority of them are going to be off of Oldenburg. That's going to be in Edelweiss Gardens or over in Sun Meadows, but there's also random streets with these duplexes throughout town. Let's talk about prices real quick. So they're newer and they are more expensive. And I know people have sticker shock, so sit down before I break down these prices, but they're selling between $375,000 to $415,000 with the median price at $389,000. $400,000. And I know it sounds like a lot, but listen to these rent rates. The median rent is $1,475 per side, which says that you're just shy of $3,000 for the duplex. But the truth is, I have clients who are renting these out for $17 to $18 per side, which means you can really make $3,400 to $3,600 on one of these duplexes. But that'll be our little secret, because a lot of people don't do that. All right, back to the numbers. Guys, the pros and the cons on these duplexes. The pros are they're relatively turnkey. So you're doing very light cosmetic updates, what I would generally call a heavy turn, maybe some flooring, maybe some paint, but you shouldn't have to mess with the cabinets or the countertops. The bathrooms should be good to go. Also, because they are newer, there's just less deferred maintenance, so you just see less issues with these overall. Also, they have very strong appreciation and they're in high demand. So the 3-3 that I mentioned, that 3-bedroom, 3-bath, becomes attractive to the students. So the duplexes with their 2-bedroom, 1-baths and the fourplexes with the same layout aren't quite as attractive to our student renters, but of course 3 roommates will buy, or will rent rather, a 3-3, each one have their own bathroom, and they will pay the higher rent. Okay, so what about the cons? Well, we talked about it. They're expensive, right? When you're talking about something near $400,000, if you're an investor putting 20 to 25% down, we're talking about putting $80,000 to $100,000 as a down payment, and that is a lot. But I do think it is worthwhile, and they do in fact cash flow pretty strong. So I think these are great for my folks who are well capitalized. They are folks that do not want to do value add. They want something more turnkey, and they want steady, passive, low risk return on their investment. Cool. That brings us to our last type, our 5th type of multifamily. And guys, these are our newer built Agg Shack duplexes. Newer built, I mean 2015 and newer. These are less common, but they are out there. They're going to be 4, 5, even 6 bedrooms per side with the same number of bathrooms. These were purpose built for students, so you're going to find them in areas close to campus in high student concentration neighborhoods. They're going to sell for $800,000 or more, and you're going to get generally $700 per bedroom, meaning you could bring in as much as $5,600 for the entire building. These are in high demand. They have minimal maintenance because they're newer, but the cash flow is not going to be quite as strong. And of course, at $800,000 to $1 million, your down payment is going to be at 20% down. It's going to be $160,000 to $200,000. Guys, if you're buying one of these, you're probably buying to put your student in one of the rooms and rent out the rest. If that is the case, this probably does make sense. Or you're in the long term, you want to own this for the next 30 or 40 years, so you want to start with a newer asset. In that case, it makes a lot of sense. However, for most of my investors, if you don't have that level of capital, this is probably not something that you're looking at. A few things to note about your multifamily in Bryan and College Station. When you guys are running your analysis, I want you to do a few things. One, keep in mind that maintenance will be more expensive in a multifamily as compared to a single family, because of course, if you own a fourplex, you're now maintaining 4 kitchens, 4 water heaters, 4 ACs. You get what I'm talking about. It's a little bit more expensive. Also, keep in mind that for the most part, your utilities will be sub-metered. The exception is your 1980s built assets. The water is not sub-metered, so generally the landlord covers that. You can expect to pay between $20 and $30 per unit. Anything more than that means you probably have a leak. Lastly, keep in mind that for a multifamily in Bryan and College Station, the expectation is that you will pay for the lawn care. So add in additional $100 a month for lawn care. Okay, I want to go to my client-based question. This is a really good conversation I had with a client about the overpriced multifamily in Bryan and College Station. They basically were saying, hey Greg, these 2000s built duplexes, they're way too overpriced. They don't make any sense. Who would buy them? And yes, looking at a $400,000 duplex compared to a $275,000 duplex makes you instinctively think, wow, that is way overpriced and these 80s built assets should cash flow better. So let's look at a very basic metric. This is simply the rent rate to purchase price. So the median rent to the median purchase price for these assets, I'm gonna put them all up on the screen here, and we're gonna look at them in order. So the older houses, I can't really give you a median price. They vary so much, they're not even worth putting on here. But let's start off with our 1980s built duplexes, where the median rent around $2,000, median purchase price $290. So we have a 0.74% rent to purchase price ratio. For the fourplexes, we're at a 0.79. For our 2000s built duplexes, we're at a 0.75. And for our Agg Shacks, we're at a 0.7. So if we're looking at this, obviously the Agg Shacks have the lowest chance of cash flow, but they're newest, that makes sense. But I really want to focus on the 2000s built duplexes versus the 80s built duplexes. Guys, we're talking about a rent to purchase price ratio difference of 0.01. So almost identical cash flow, but one asset is 20 years newer, therefore less expensive for maintenance and in higher demand. So in the long run, do you think that a $290,000 duplex or $400,000 duplex will provide you a better return? The answer, quite simply, is the newer asset. So if you have the money, if you're well capitalized, shoot for the newer duplexes. The only caveat to that is if you are looking for value add, then you're gonna have more options, right? Because there's 1,000 of the 80s built duplexes. So if you're looking for value add, you might go with the older asset. But if you're one of my passive investors, you're looking for something turnkey and you want good cash flow, it makes more sense to focus on the 2000s built assets. So in general, the best asset for value add and Airbnb is your older homes with the ADU. Your best cash flow with light rehab is your 80s built fourplexes and duplexes. Your best investment for passive investors are your 2000s built duplexes. And your best investment if you're a parent buying for your child while they attend A&M is probably the Agg Shacks, but again, you got a lot of money to put down to afford those. Guys, I hope this provided you value. If it did, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel, and guys, my only ask is until I drop my next video next week, you take it easy.